I've seen three over the last 5 years. We saw a huge blockchain pump, and then we saw the kind of the metaverse pump that was a little bit after it. And then now the last like year and a half, we've been in this AI pump.
Yeah.
Now we always get the pump and then it dumps, but then the slow climb. Now that slow climb has finally got back to that pump zone on crypto stuff. And then I think same thing with the metaverse, like the metaverse stuff, like your bubble burst a little bit, came back down, and then creeping back. Like here's the real people are, crawling back out of the hole. And now I think we're primed for over the next 6 months. All of a sudden, the actual mature metaverse stuff, like with the Apple glasses, for example, is like, finally, that's probably the right way to do that after, years of kind of doing it goofy and whatever. But I think you're kind of on that cusp. So A, congratulations on timing because I think you're in a good spot. And B, well, go ahead. What is that maturity? What does it look like on your end? And am I crazy or am I thinking about this right?
No, you're right on the mark. It's very much like Gartner's hype cycle, right? All these things that had a huge hype cycle, all the get rich quick people and the scammers jump in, and it's like, even when blockchain and crypto was first out, people were like, "Oh, we're a tea company. Now let's rebrand ourselves as blockchain tea, so our stock goes up." Right? There was no blockchain there. And now that things are, have these hype cycles, they're kind of tailing off. That also gets rid of a lot of the chaff or just the useless stuff. And then, guys like us that we're build, IP, technology, real business model, monetization, all that stuff. We survive these huge up and downs and, excitement and just overhype. And then, now, like you said, we're kind of like on this upswing and we're really well positioned for it. But what's really interesting is, people, you have to think about metaverse stuff differently because it's not just VR, it's not just AR, but we're like the only industry that can encompass every other industry, right? Bring us your AI, bring us your blockchain, bring us your machine learning, your computer vision, your IoT, your whatever. It all fits underneath like our umbrella, which kind of makes us unique. Oh man, I had a really good point. Where was I going with this?
The hype
anyway, so now that AI is right. Where are we? So now that AI is kind of percolating down, it's still hot, but now it's like metaverse is kind of becoming back. And for as much as, it's like I have this conversation with people, on a fairly regular basis. There are like billions upon billions have been spent on AR and VR, whether it's, from the Oculus Rift or the Google Glass or Apple's Glass or Meta's, Horizons or, whatever.
Yeah.
And if you go up to a regular guy in the street and say, "Hey, name 3 mass market, AR applications or name, 3 really amazing VR, 3D world things," but you can't say Pokemon Go and you can't say, Beat Saber. They just look at you with this blank stare. And I'm like, okay, why is that? There's so much novelty stuff out there, or so many people chasing the same ideas and not really trying to understand how to, maximize the potential of the technology. But again, when you have these huge hype things where people just throw money at, whatever, with no real substance to it, it goes away, time goes by, and then, the people that are actually building stuff that are trying to keep their head out of the craziness, we almost always, survive. And then now, it's our time to hit that hockey stick. So I think for sure, as we start rolling out stuff, I know a few other companies are doing some interesting things. I think this summer leading into the fall, you're going to see a resurgence in some metaverse things, but a lot of them are going to have additional aspects that again tie into these other bits, whether it's IoT or again, blockchain is still necessary for a lot of things for metaverse, and then certainly some AI applications, whether it's for simulations things or, the easy one is basically, AI operated avatars really change the level of immersion for virtual worlds, which is great for games. But then you have to think about too, well, what are the applications for other industries? That's where the real money is, and that's where the long-term value is going to come into play.
More privacy, less passwords, and better incentives or integrated payments. And so like the idea of, creating a future of the internet where people can actually own their own data, right? Where it's not, centralized, data silos, big companies that are in control of the user's data anymore, but we put the focus on the users, as far as like, even with app development, where there can be better incentives, better user experience that can be created when users actually are more in control. So that kind of was the main thing.
For sure. So let's dig into that a little bit, because there's been, I don't even know at this point, there's been a few attempts at this, like, hey, go our direction. Like you have the sort of gate to chain group that seems, super integrated with things like STAS tokens. And so they start to make like, for better or worse, start to make decisions about, we're going to support this token protocol or this key derivation path, or these kind of things.
Yeah.
Now, I off the top of my head, I can think of like half a dozen versions of this just in BSV. So you sort of had like the Unwriter stack, for example, which used, a bunch of stuff. Some of it still gets used. Some of it doesn't get used at all anymore. Same with like, you had kind of a run token ecosystem, and that had a lot of its, stuff that was built to be adjacent to it or integrate directly to it and that kind of thing. So what is a key differentiator in the Babbage approach that might make someone say, okay, I would go this direction instead of, any other thing that exists in the universe?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think primarily probably the main thing is like, we're actually trying to, start initiatives around standardization. And like, there's the whole BRC thing that we've worked on, right? With different specs, trying to open
really
up the
cool, by the way.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Ty can probably say them by name and by heart. I maybe like one or two. But yeah, just, I guess, started the conversation with different people, maybe, Gate to Chain or other companies. Like, let's sit down and like, let's kind of standardize some of these, because once we can kind of come to an agreement, at least on the lower levels, there's so much innovation and creative stuff that can be built on top of that. But if the foundations are constantly shifting, then, app developers are always struggling to try to keep up with different wallets that they want to support and having to rewrite their apps many times. So I think that's a good place to start, and maybe what slightly differentiates Babbage.
Yeah. So it's funny. I can't remember who said it, but it was something about standards in tech, and that, you get standards organizations, you get people that are like, think about the organizations that they come up with standards for things like, what should a USB plug look like? And that's like a conglomeration of like IEEE and lots of like orgs that I think a lot of people don't readily understand, but there are groups of people that are, that are like debating like, well, this is what the USB-C standard is going to mean globally. And the joke is always that they never actually deprecate other standards. When you try to become the standard, you just become the next standard that also exists.
True.
So, what do you think? Like, could you give an example or two? Like, what is something that differentiates Babbage specifically in your, the way that you would go about something like, and not to get super spicy, I'm not asking you to call anybody out, but like, what is something that perhaps people are doing wrong, and that if they would simply listen to a podcast of one of your guys, like Ty does a lot of good streams, the BRC stuff is actually very clear and well documented. Like, what is something that you wish people would just kind of like just take and adopt and run with?
Okay. I mean, Ty has lots of videos on this topic, which people can go check out on our YouTube channel.
Oh, I know.
Great content. I guess what I'll say is, like, first thing that kind of comes to mind is there's some things around, not to get too in depth, but like the key derivation side of things. There's BIP32 versus like what we use at Babbage is type 42. And so there's some privacy improvements that can come from doing what's called counterparty encryption between two people for increased privacy, right? So that's kind of one thing that pops into my mind about maybe something that we do differently here. Another thing would be supporting like all types of transaction types and tokens. So if you just build your systems just in regards to, I guess, the UTXO model, where you're not, necessarily worrying about the specific protocol, but you can support many different types just by supporting like the UTXO. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I always tell people, let Bitcoin be Bitcoin.
Yeah, right.
AI has become absolutely expert at manipulating human behavior, like to an extent that you can't possibly fathom.
Yeah.
And then it's everywhere. And it's like the text on the internet is rapidly becoming replaced with AI text.
Yeah.
So before long, probably 2/3 of everything we read will have been written by an AI. So do we want to just be chess pieces on AI's board? And who is controlling the AI and what are their intentions? You know what I mean? So essentially, it's very, very rapidly coming to the point where it's got too much power. It's got too much ability to manipulate and control. And like that's coming out as like a freight train. Like that's not slowing down.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be like hysterical about it, but this is just true, right?
I don't think there's a way to be hysterical about it, because I mean, we've been, Asimov or something, or shoot, even, James Cameron was writing about this 40. This is what Terminator's about.
Yeah.
Like where does this go? Now there's people, I remember Daniel Krawitz many years ago now, maybe even close to 10 years ago, talking about that he thinks that Skynet, if you take the James Cameron Terminator universe, that he does not think Skynet would cause a nuclear war or any of these other things. He thinks Skynet would just get really good at capitalism. And because ultimately the best way to do the best thing for yourself is to be the most cooperative. Now, he's also a kind of an ideologue, and I agree with him about a lot of things, but we're in the same boat in that, our predictions about Bitcoin and all these things have ultimately not come true. So we might just be a little too, rose-colored glasses on. Well, I mean,
if you think about it, like we might have the nice whitewashed version of AI that's friendly and, inclusive and all the right things. But if somebody who has real power has a differently, aligned AI, a differently trained AI, really we can't know in what ways they're using it. And I mean, we've seen, Twitter fill up with, I don't know, maybe millions of bots. I don't know, probably millions of bots, right?
Probably, yeah.
And every kind of article that we're exposed to is probably a good percentage of it now is AI written.
Yeah, sure.
And so, the horse is already bolted, if you know what I mean. So at this point, I think we have to really think outside the box and really think about, like, how do we pin it back down?
Yeah. So this is an interesting thing. I mean, we're living in an era that is being very rapidly disrupted, where Scott Galloway, when he was on stage, was talking a bit about AI. And
I missed that one. I really want to see that one too. Yeah, I'll have to find out.
And Stephen Bartlett, they both kind of said the same thing. I think it was Stephen that specifically said, "Hey, 10 years ago, if you would have asked, what should you definitely do?" and it was like, learn to code. And now it's like, that doesn't make any sense at all, because you can literally just tell the AI what you want it to code, and it'll get you 95%
I'm going to push back on that a little bit, though. I mean, let's be honest. It's very hard to get some meaningful code out of an AI unless you understand the stack and
the
terminology. But, I mean, I still think James, still learn your programming, mate. That's my son.
Well, but the real risk is, we're kind of in that, first real year of iteration on that. I mean, 5 years from now, think about how good such a thing could be. And so I think the risk is, your typical white collar job, your middle management or your creatives. And, and I say this as a creative, like I write as one of my major sources of income, and like, how difficult will it be to take all of my publicly available videos and articles and all of these things and create an AI that just does my job for me. And I might get lucky and be able to make a licensing fee off of my likeness, but why bother paying me to get up and work? Like, I feel a little bit sick today. I'm a little bit under the weather today. But AI Kurt never would be. He'd never have to shave his head before he goes on the air, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, he'd never be in a bad mood. I know. It's on and on. Like, things are changing so fast and so beyond all recognition that we're struggling to adapt to it, keep up with it, legislate for it. Like, it's a real issue.
We really like one-set ordinals is because it's totally compatible with Bitcoin script or script contracts, right? Yeah. Because other token protocols before that, they constrained the locking script, and that's where all the logic of the smart contract resides. But with ordinals, it's not important. The overall token protocol is like on a higher level, and it fits perfectly. So you can, everything that you can do with regular Satoshis, I mean, ordinals is basically just Satoshis, but everything you can do with Satoshis, you can do with ordinals. So that's why I really like another aspect of it is really like the culture. We like experimental, culture. I mean, the boomers, the enterprise, it has its place, but a lot of the innovation usually happens like with tinkerers and people like just play around with things. And from that, it generates a lot of ideas. It sort of builds the map of where not to go and where to go. And the enterprise usually follows that. And we really like that hacker culture. And once that ordinals, it also, even in like BSV land, it did that push to the culture more like thinkers and everything. But even in like BTC, especially in BTC, it did the same thing. So people before it were like Bitcoin just payments, that's it. But now it's starting to change. Yeah, it's starting to change. So on Signet, there you proposed like re-enabling Opcat. So it enables a lot of things. So the future is bright. Ultimately, we don't care like if it's on BSV or BTC. If ultimately it's the end, Bitcoin. It's one Bitcoin, and that's what we want, right? And it doesn't matter the path of how we achieve that.
No, it's funny. I always say that, and the laser eye people don't believe me, but I say all the time, like, I'm trying to protect BTC. If BTC would like open up the block size limit and turn on all the I would be pumped in that situation, because for me it's about the technology. I'm not trying to protect my BSV bags, which, admittedly, yes, I have my BSV, but like the point is to build a business on Bitcoin that can't be built any other way. And like BSV is the broadest pool for that right now. But if BTC, for whatever reason said, hey, you know what? The BSV people really have done a lot of really cool stuff, and all of a sudden those features started making their way over to BTC. Like, I'm not complaining in that situation. Like, I am celebrating in that situation, because it's like, I'm trying to be this sort of evangelist, basically, and like that's like a conversion story. It's like, imagine if I was a missionary in a country, I wouldn't be upset if all of those people converted to my religion, because like I'd be out of a job. That's not the idea. The idea is the conversion, right? So no, I think that's really cool. And I also think it's really cool that you guys built like the BTC related script stuff to sort of show them like, hey guys, you could do this. This is pretty cool. And I think that was smart. I try to bridge those gaps myself, but nobody wants to hear it from me for some reason. So
I mean, I've been talking to people as well, and it's sort of like one time I had this conversation, right? And I was like, it basically boiled down to that if BTC were to raise the block size and re-enable opcodes, it would sort of be a valid competitor to what the BSV guys are doing. And the person said that it's a bad thing, there's like fear in it. I was like, why is that a bad thing? You'll be the more, you just get more valuable, you as a company or even as a developer, right? So
I would love Gorilla Pool. So like the tooling we've created, like we got Jungle Bus, we got a couple of secret things in the hopper, but ultimately like we're a Bitcoin pool. So all of our infrastructure if BTC were to like pull the plug on being constipated about everything, like we could pivot to being like a BTC services provider. Like we already run some BTC ordinals infrastructure, like that kind of thing, because like we want to support creativity on Bitcoin, like whatever that means to you, you know. So we're supportive of that kind of thing. I think it's funny how I don't know, just how tribal everybody can be. That, you know,
exactly.
I always say, man, like my hope is that the laser people who hate me today, that in 5 years, like maybe we all get to go out to dinner together and be like, hey, remember when we misunderstood each other? I'm really glad that we're like doing business together now. Isn't this better?
I think that what people have been trying to do over the last 5 years is sell shovels, in that they want to be the infrastructure component that everyone has to use. And like, so, I mean, I'm part of that problem in my ELAS years. Trying to sell the platform that everyone else builds on top of is like a common pattern that we've seen over the last 5 years. And I think that that's kind of Web 2 thinking. And I think that the future ahead of us, the sort of prosperous future that we can imagine, is more decentralized in that, you know, you can actually have your own software stacks be interoperable and not have to rely on platform-based things like Planaria was necessarily. So I think, yeah, from my perspective, those were some of the mistakes that we made over the last 5 years. You know, and it's not like everyone made that mistake or anything like that, but that's how I've seen it evolve. Now, I think a lot more people are thinking like, how do we build stuff that doesn't just look like G Suite and so on? Yeah. So that's how I've seen it evolve.
I make a lot of AOL analogies when it comes to like everybody in BSV for the last 5 years has want to be AOL circa like 1996.
Yeah.
Be like, hey, we're going to introduce everybody to the MetaNet, and here's this toolbox, and yes, it's branded, but it's also like it's also safe because we built it for you. Yeah. And then, you know, I remember in the, I don't even know, like early 2000s at some point when I realized like, oh, I can just use a web browser and be outside of this ecosystem if I want to be. And I think that's kind of what we're transitioning to, is like open protocols everywhere, like use what you need to use. Like your data isn't stuck here. Like everything from your basic like wallet management to key derivation to like, here's how to use Bitcoin as a non-proprietary templated system.
Yeah.
Really key.
Unwriter, to be fair, did lead the way on that thinking in terms of the protocols.
I agree.
You know, some sort of, you know, Bitcom is just registering things. But the problem is convincing other people to use that same protocol to announce their new protocol, so to speak. So everyone was still trying to be the, you know, the URL that you go to discover other URLs. So yeah, I think some of the stuff that we're now working on and will soon release is addressing that, in that it's, you know, defining some things that are more generic than a specific provider. Yeah, and really trying to go out of our way to always build something a little bit white label, so that hypothetically it's just like, well, this is one way you could do it, because it is helpful to kind of agree on how to do things. Yeah, and because then you can cooperate a little bit more easily. But the difference with the BSVA doing this stuff is that there is no sort of subtext of, oh, and by the way, we own everything from here on. You know, so quite encouragingly over the last year, we've been a part of driving forward that narrative. We're not the only ones in the scene, obviously, but we've got some good alignment with a core group of developers that is expanding. Yeah, contractors that are coming forward and helping us put these tools together. So, what do you think of the concept of Bitcoin as money? Like
sort of Bitcoin Cash maximalist type, where like, hey, we should use the base asset as money on a daily basis. And you know, like, do you want to be going to the grocery store and paying for things in BSV, or do you think that should be abstracted away and you're using digital rupee when you're in India, or you're using, you know, Philippine peso in the Philippines, or you're using US dollars if you're in, you know, New York City or something? Like, what do you think there's a mix of that, or what do you think that looks like?
My heart has been for sound money. That's what brought me to Bitcoin at the very beginning. But what I see and what I have learned following Craig as well, it has been a lot of learning. I can see that Bitcoin won't be getting used for payments at all in any of the countries for the foreseeable future. And for that future, it's going to be like gold is not used for payments today. Right. It's not that bad. You can have a commodity market regulating Bitcoin just like gold is only traded, and you don't have payments happening with gold. And it's probably used in jewelry and other places. So it will be used like paying the transaction fees and plumbing basically in the background while it's getting traded on the commodity markets, a regulated market. That's the best scenario I see it as, until we have some really innovative new age governments coming up adopting Bitcoin as payments directly. I would love to see that happening. Probably chess move number 15 when we are much bigger.
Sure. What do you think of like real world asset? So there's been a few really interesting proposals, including across like the Ethereum ecosystem and stuff too. Lots of people talking about RWA tokens, and like what do you think about making payments in gold or silver or platinum, or you know, salt or sugar or whatever else? Do you think that is a viable like compromise between like your sort of CBDC all the way on this side and then maybe Bitcoin or gold payments all the way on the other, like real world asset tokens as like a payment currency? Do you think that's a thing, or is that a pipe dream?
No, real world tokens, real world assets, I'm a very big proponent. I think the way the ledger is going to be adopted is by tokenization, by having more real world assets to be represented onto it. And I treat the layers of assets as basically 3 layers. You can think of it. 3 layers of, essentially, if I tell you the entire financial system is supposed to run on the ledger. So how are you going to begin and how are you going to end? So you can divide it into 3 parts. The first is the money itself needs to be represented, the national currency. And that is the first part. The second part is the financial markets need to be represented. And the third part is the goods and services need to be represented. So all the goods and services come into as tickets, as coupons, reward points, representing different services, all of that as goods and services. The financial markets, the second one, is all the shares, derivatives, options, all of that. And the money market, the first one, the base level, the payments are going to happen with that. That's for sure. You can't have payments with the tickets or goods and services and nor with the financial instruments. You can have it only with money, but there are 2 types of money. There's the M0 money supply, the base level money, the CBDC. Then there's the M1 money supply, which is actually 90% or more of the money supply, which is the bank deposits. So even that is a solution. So doing a tokenization for all of these, the entire spectrum of all these assets, very neutrally, that CBDC is as neutral as goods and services. So that's when we'll have the entire economy running on our shared global ledger.
Yeah. It's exciting.
That's what excites me. That's what is the only hope I can see. And that's why I say that we need to have all the solutions. We need the stablecoin or the CBDC. And on the other end, just try to tokenize whatever industry you're in, try to tokenize assets from that industry.
Sure. No, it's smart. I like it. And actually it's very practical, but just, I say this all the time, like conceptually it's simple, but it's not easy. So
Not easy.
yeah.
Application, just where we are between blockchain and the conflation of cryptocurrencies, and just the idea that, I mean, you go and talk to anybody in the cybersecurity world and talk to them about Bitcoin or blockchain, and they're butt puckers because typically that's what they have to pay in ransomware, right? They're not thinking that this is a technology that enhances their information security practices. So we really wanted to start with something that was a huge problem, which was detection. Obviously, it's gotten worse since we first started. It was 220 days and 212 days, and now 292 days to identify a breach, right? So it's going in the wrong directions. It's getting costlier. It used to be $5.4 million is the average cost of a breach beyond 30 days. It's now closer to $6 million. So these are significant issues that, obviously pick up a paper any day that having any college, any hospital, any government is facing. So we wanted to highlight, the ability of blockchain to provide real-time file monitoring and integrity of those files. So what we're able to utilize blockchain is taking a fingerprint of a state of a network every 10 seconds, which we can get down to a blink of an eye, 0.03 seconds of that state of that network. And as you can tell, if it's write only or write once, read only, now you have the ability when a record changes, which say your log files should never change, right? 86% of all hacks include a file change to your logs, right? To where they're hiding, their IP or the way that they've come in. So now if you could, if I tell you right now that utilizing just, a simple hash of network state and taking that every 10 seconds and comparing it to the previous, we can now detect instantly if your network has been breached. Would that be something you're interested in, right? Obviously, because it comes at a significant cost, $6 million, just for that 30-day breach. And it lowers the time and down the line impact that all the rest of your people that are on your network, vendors and service providers and everybody else, that they're potentially going to be impacted by this. And we saw this more so with SolarWinds, where you had 36,000 direct customers and then another 36,000 indirect customers.
Yeah, cascades.
Yeah. So now, with CertaHash, it's that suite of, actually we say 5, but it's more like 7 different applications. Sovereign Shield, well, let me back up. CertaHash Sentinel node is available commercially today. I think we do almost 50% of all the transactions on the BSV blockchain at this point, and have for quite some time. It's been very successful in educating and really fortifying networks of the partners that we've been able to bring in and test out this new technology. So we're extremely excited about that aspect. But, it's funny because the education has caught up to some of the innovation that we've developed, right? So now that we have Sentinel node, it's funny to see people start talking about identity. And this is something that has been, prominently discussed even in the last 4 months, say in the BSV blockchain world, where, they're discussing a lot about identity solutions and how this is important. And, yes, this is vitally important. And, when you start implementing it into identity, into the NIST cybersecurity framework, we start to see how, we can mitigate DDoS, we can mitigate brute force attacks very simply, like super, super simple, right? That is very easily explainable to anybody. And when they sort of ponder the solution, they're like, yes, that works. But I mean, we've gone beyond that and started integrating even some of the other aspects of recovery, which really brings us to the CrowdStrike topic. CertaHash Sentinel node is actually deployed on a single universal source of truth, right? We do not have mirrored sites that you might have malware injected into it. You can see the sign off of the signature of the latest update when you grab it. So that really mitigates a lot of issues that we saw with CrowdStrike, and ultimately in the recovery realm as well, in the essence of being able to recover images of networks that you've been able to save on chain, right? To have that integrity of that data ensured at least from that timestamp moment. But there's a lot of different ways to use all of these different functions and features, whether you're talking about identity, whether you're talking about recovery or response, to integrate them all together. Because again, if you look at blockchain as an overlay network, you're using all these functions and features to empower each other. So whether it's utilizing, single source for the deployment of the software, or whether it's using the single source for, maintaining the integrity of the state of the network, all of these things can be applied, utilizing microtransactions or just your public-private key pair to access control.
We have a lot of players that are actually playing with these cards. We do have big collectors and things, but yeah, you get into things like Pokemon, the players versus the collectors. Yeah, the collectors are 1,000, 10,000x bigger than the people that are actually playing it. So the collectability side of all of this is a huge deal. And we've kind of been working on getting into physical stores and things like that over the last 3 to 6 months. And then this kind of happened, and we're like, okay, like we have a solution, for Pokemon, for Magic, to sell these, kind of like gift cards in stores. Players go home, redeem the codes digitally, and then, all, like you mentioned, Bitcoin allows for all of that to be provably fair, distributed, all of that kind of stuff. And then, there's a way for players to burn the digital version and get shipped, a serialized version of the cards that they want physical versions of. So yeah, there's a lot going on in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and just beyond just Champions TCG itself, just high level, looking at what blockchain enables a business to do to reach a market in a different way. I think it's phenomenal. It's unbelievable. I call ourselves digital manufacturers. That concept is a little bit, like foreign to people, but it is the manufacturing of digital product. And it doesn't exist. We're hitting the market in a brand new way. And we just so happen to, and this was all Miles's brainchild. He brought this idea to me. I personally loved it. 30 years in the trading card industry. But what's ironic is that, some of the competitors that we're facing, Magic the Gathering, Marvel, Disney, these are some really well-known, companies. And they're selling
startups whose names we've never heard of.
Yeah. They're just some run-of-the-mill companies. They're selling trading card games that you actually can't trade the cards. When Miles and I were walking into the shops to do some market research, we didn't even have to present our value proposition. The customers were coming to us and telling us how furious they were that they have these digital cards that they can't trade. They can't pass them down to their children. They can't do a number of things. And blockchain just comes in and it completely reshapes that industry. I use the example of maybe like the introduction of sound to a movie. There was a time when movies didn't include sound, and then technology allowed that, and the industry never went back. Or look at Blockbuster with the distribution of VHSs compared to the innovation of streaming technology with Netflix. So what we're ripe to do because of blockchain is and what we can actually do is profit share with these facilitators of of our local game stores, because we have such an instant distribution channel with blockchain that we can afford to say, okay, well, you're our sales channel. Here's how we want to make this worth your while. And it's just good old fashioned capitalism at that point.
Well, and what just occurred to me as I'm sitting here listening to this, I realized that doing this completely digitally actually solves the problem of your collectors versus gamers, that you're not going to devalue your cards by playing with them if you're playing with them digitally. So Bridget with a shout out. Yeah, Bitcoin fixes fake olive oil. I can think of so many things. Like, you mentioned saffron, but I know there's also that you get the same thing with like truffle oil and these kind of things, where it's just like, you're going to pay $50 for a little vial of the stuff, and it's like, it's canola oil with some extract in it, so it's it really is an important thing.
That's where we are unique with our system, because there is a lot of company out there who do traceability on blockchain, or saying at least that they're using a blockchain, but none of them are using the public enterprise blockchain, which has the scalability, which has the cost efficiency, which has the data integrity, the data availability. I used to talk about the data integrity and availability all the time, because this blockchain has been up and running for 15 years. It had never been hacked for 15 or soon 16 years. Yeah. No other system has that. Same with availability. No other system has an availability of 100.00% for the last 11 years.
Right.
It's just mind-blowing. And that we can use this now with scaling up to 1 million transactions per second plus, and very, very cost efficient. So I just had a meeting today with another traceability company, and they simply didn't believe me that there is a blockchain that can do that. So that's our unique selling point, that we are actually using this public blockchain, which gives us unique characteristics to this. And then talking about olive oil, honey, and these kind of things, is often smaller producers, small farms. So, and most of the other systems are way too expensive for small companies. But we can actually offer this on a very, very cost-efficient deal for a small producer. So like this olive oil producer here, it's a small farmer, or small, but it's just a couple of guys in Italy. Yeah. And they can afford to put this QR code on there. You don't need to buy a multi-billion-dollar system to do that. But at the same time, we can integrate with SAP on the top line there. So we can scale up to Nestle and Coca-Cola levels and Walmart levels at the same time. So it's such a wide scale on companies. And it's also often, most systems today are very limited, centralized. You have some companies just in the beginning of the supply chain or in the center with distribution and logistics, and then you have the retail side. There you have different solutions, but more or less none of them covering the whole supply chain, from raw material, from the fish eggs out to the plate.
The message is drowned out with crypto. So we actually have a terrible headwind against us. We could be building these wonderful products, and I know Gorilla Pool, you guys have got some great products there, amazing stuff, and you would think that somebody would notice it and say, oh, hang on, that's rather useful and valuable, let's dive in. But they can't, because they've got this veil of crypto over them, and as soon as they look at you, they're going to say, okay, another crypto miner, there's 1 million of them out there making lots of money, what are you guys doing? So we have the same problem everyone else has had for all eternity, is try and get attention in a cluttered world, a crowded, noisy world, by being more innovative and cleverer and more creative than the next guy. But we now have this monster that's just sucking the life out of Bitcoin. The crypto is a terrible cancer, and unfortunately, we can't speak people down from the ledge. We can't slap them awake and say, guys, get that crypto. It's just pixie dust in your pockets. It's going to evaporate tomorrow, the next day, one day. We don't know. How long are you willing to stick around? But this is the issue. They are drunk. They've drunk the Kool-Aid, and the Kool-Aid is in their brains and is fluffing up their common sense. Yeah. So we might just have to, and I've been through this before. My first startup was in 1998. It was this online startup. It was so exciting at that time, 98, 99, 2000. I thought I was going to be the next, in those days, Mark Andreessen or something. Yeah. And then, of course, the dot-com crash nailed everybody. And it was a shock. But, of course, the ecosystem grew out of that. The actual value started, emerging, and people started correcting their sort of got their vision and how things would turn out. So we're in that cycle. We're in the crypto phase of this cycle, and I just hope it ends sooner rather than later, because it's really put a great anchor on companies, BSV companies, who could be bringing so much value to the world today.
No, absolutely. That's
it's sobering, frankly. I mean, the whole thing about it is just such a, I don't know. I like your example about, you know, the .com bubble and that era when it felt like, oh, everybody's getting rich. I mean, basically everybody got rich by accident in the late 90s, much the same way as people got rich by accident, a few times now in the crypto space. I think 2017 and 2021 were big watershed years for, I don't know, my friend told me to buy this dog coin, and you know, and I paid off my house with it. So it's you know, it is exciting, and it's really, really hard to explain to somebody why they're foolish, but also made absurd money on an idea. So I think, you know, coming from where you're coming from as a service provider, or, you know, you're a bit of infrastructure in this space. Also maybe relevant that you're from a BRICS nation, and there's a lot of discussion about sort of de-dollarization and some of these things too, where, hey, what is the center of technology and culture and power and money and economics and all these, like, where is that going to be over the next 50 years? I think there's a lot of people predicting that it will not be the United States. And you're in South Africa, which is one of the major players in this sort of BRICS coalition of, hey, we really think it's going to be China and Russia and these people, which I don't really agree with. I think there's a major trust problem with places like Russia and China that people aren't going to get over very easily. But, you know, I've been wrong before. What do you think things look like from an economic standpoint, like big macroeconomic picture? What are your thoughts on maybe BRICS in general? How does Bitcoin play into these kind of things? And then where does CentB fit into, hey, all of a sudden the dollar has collapsed, or all these things? You know, are you preparing for, this rapid, hey, we got the first BRICS dollar token available on CentB, or like, what are your thoughts on that kind of thing?
Yeah, so leaving the economics and the foreign stuff aside, I'm not really an expert on that, but I'll definitely speak to the Bitcoin side of things. And of course, everybody, is always thinking, and since the beginning, that Bitcoin was just such a perfect solution for the African continent. You know, this idea of Bitcoin rising in Africa, and I was bitten by that bug. I thought, well, I'm African, and I got into Bitcoin early, and I saw the vision, and I have been fighting that vision for 7 years now. And again, unfortunately, the whole idea of crypto has hampered that vision.
And now it's time for the meme of the week.
Well, if Bitcoin will become the ultimate type of a form of the currency been adopted by human society, I can tell exactly what's going to happen as the worst scenario, or the must scenario. We're all going to die. This is not a joke.